what would our system say? Turned 18 sometime in there. Everything you do after that, at least, right? What do you guys think? Are you morally culpable? You're abducted at 11, commit a heinous act. The next 10 years you live in the bush committing heinous acts. Rape, torture, etc. Now you come home. What's the society supposed to do with you? What does justice look like? So, I'll table that for now because I don't know. The conversation that was happening in Uganda was the International Criminal Court, which I think is ultimately a good thing. This idea that we need to hold dictators to justice, that we need to be able to hold dictators to being accountable, right? Like Milosevic was the first one that they tried. The International Criminal Court was saying we need to bring these folks to justice. And they actually issued, just like they did in Sudan, they issued warrants for Joseph Kony, the leader of the rebel army. It was actually the first warrant issued by the ICC. And the peace community was really, really divided over this. Some people said, absolutely, he's a heinous violator of human rights and needs to be brought to justice by the International Criminal Court. The other half of people said, now what motivation does he possibly have to come to the peace talks? And he's going to just keep the war going, which has been what's happened. He's kept the war going. And maybe it seems like a good idea to bring the guy to justice, unless you're the Congolese woman who lost your kids last month, when his army came through town. You lost your kid, you don't really care about the International Criminal Court indictment and whether or not he can be brought to justice. You care that the war is still going and your child died last week. So this whole conversation was happening in Uganda at the same time we were developing this program in schools. And for us, it was very, very satisfying to be involved in a local issue that was really complex, but reflected the bigger questions. Because what you'll find if you go into international affairs or any social justice career is it's pretty depressing a lot of the time. I mean, there are definitely victories for human rights along the way, but there's a lot of times where it's just tough. And so we at least were getting to see schools take the initiative to transform the way they were treating kids on a smaller extent than what was happening in the broader national scene. And we were hoping that it would promote dialogue and serve as a model and reflect some of the better, more positive things that were also happening. So that's kind of what we did for a long time. We worked with schools to help develop indigenous restorative practices that they could institutionalize and use in their discipline codes. So I'm friends with all kinds of kids on Facebook, like, thanks, mister, I didn't get beat anymore. And I actually learned from what happened, and now I'm in college. And many, many, many Ugandans are trying to find a way of how do we maintain our ethnic and cultural identity, and what's good and beautiful and great about our culture, weed out the sort of negative things that we've developed through oppression, whether that be colonial oppression or oppression that was happening between ethnic groups within Uganda itself before and after colonialism. Because every culture has so many beautiful, wonderful things about it, but also every culture that's oppressed develops a lot of bad habits. Like if when a kid is beaten in the home growing up, that kid develops bad habits that are then socially unproductive at school and when they have their own family. And cultures, I think, tend to be the same way. You oppress a culture for 100 years, the culture develops a lot of negative things. And so Ugandans are in this really interesting moment of trying to kind of unpack what's good about Western liberal democracy. What's good about that? And what's good about what we have to offer? What's more productive from our own backgrounds? And so it's just really, that's kind of what I did for 3 years. I mean, the first year and a half was really talking and learning and developing this program. And for a year and a half, I went to every far-flung corner of Uganda and talked to educators about how we treat kids, about a more restorative way to deal with discipline problems. And at the same time, then during all the holiday breaks, we worked with actual kids, and we did inter-ethnic peace-building kind of conferences. We brought kids together from traditionally adversarial ethnic groups and spent 2 or 3 weeks together becoming friends, doing projects, planting trees. And a lot of those relationships are still sort of going. So, anyways, you were going to have a question?
Yeah, just going back to the national justice mechanisms. At the same time that the ICC indictments were going on, I know they attempted to use traditional justice mechanisms as well. Did you see the effects of that?
Well, here's what was happening, okay? So the Acholi in the north were in a really awkward spot, in that they were the victims of their own rebellion. Okay, the rebellion was an Acholi rebellion against the NRM government, Museveni's government, but it wasn't all the Acholis. And so since the rebellion never really spread, the rebel army was actually attacking its own people to try to build up its base of child soldiers. So what happened is, as the Acholi were trying to sort of use their own traditional justice mechanisms, and the ICC was offering its indictments, the Museveni government was also doing things to sort of spoil it. So Betty Bigombe was the Ugandan peace person asked to go talk to the resistance army. And so she was kind of interested in bringing the rebels back and doing traditional justice. What was hard to know was that if the Museveni government would actually support the Acholi people in carrying out their own indigenous forms of justice. So what often happens, I mean, long story short, lower level offenders, if you will, lower level kind of rebel soldiers were often allowed to come back and go through traditional processes and were restored to their communities, and there was awesome stuff. I mean, I met a lot of those kids. A lot of them were in school. My wife and I worked at a school. One of the schools that we really worked closely with was a school for girls who'd been abducted and had children in the bush with rebel armies and had now come back. And these girls were doing great. I mean, they committed atrocities. They'd had children in the bush, and now they were back in school and had been sort of reinstated and were amazingly healthy for the stuff that they'd been through. The fact that they could get up every day was just blew my mind. So there, you did see, you met individual people all the time who've been through traditional restorative justice processes.
But you're saying it only works for lower level offenders?
Because the higher level offenders, the government wouldn't give the guarantee that they would respect the Acholi justice process. So the higher level offenders were sort of like, they didn't have a lot of motivation to give it a go. Because they didn't know if they went through that process and everything that it required, if at the end of the day the Museveni government would still arrest them and take them through Western justice. So because the Museveni government wouldn't ever unequivocally say, we support Acholi justice, it was very hard to really get any high-level, really responsible parties to go through the traditional justice mechanisms. A few people did go through the traditional justice mechanisms, and it was really awkward because then right away, they clearly cut a deal with the government, because then right away they're given a powerful position in the army to hunt down the rebels. Not real reconciliatory, you know. So that's, I guess, does that answer your question? It worked beautifully when and where it was allowed to be tried, but it didn't really get to the deeper questions of what about the people who are really responsible for a lot of this because the government didn't let it give it a go. And maybe they shouldn't have. I don't know.
So what do you think would get to the root of like that, the problem? Because obviously the ICC then it's not working.
No, not working at all.
I know they're trying to possibly start like a Truth and Reconciliation Commission.
Yeah, so the organization we worked for, we were one of the kind of, all the Ugandans that worked with us were big advocates for the Truth and Reconciliation Commission early on. I think at some point that's your only option. And it's you don't feel very good about it. You don't feel very good about bringing people back into your society who've raped hundreds of women. But if the alternative is prolonged conflict and keeping it going, that doesn't seem very appetizing either. So at some point, I mean, most of our Ugandan friends landed in one of two camps. If they actually were from the north and were suffering from the war themselves, they tended to advocate, forget justice, let's just get peace. You know, let's just forgive them and move on. We're sick of this. 25 years of not living in your home. Living in camp, taking handouts from the UN. That tended to be their position. People who were from other parts of the country who weren't as directly affected tended to want to say, no, let's win the war and take the rebels to the ICC. So it has a lot to do with where you stood, what your position is. I tend to think that we should give a lot of voice and power to the people most affected. And so I would tend to think their view should be the one we privilege in the dialogue.
So what would that look like an amnesty for?
Yeah. Amnesty with some kind of process. But you're not going to get any kind of justice